I think poverty in the UK is intolerable. I'm going to set out the arguments why I think this case is strong, but I'm also going to consider what type of arguments people believe in order to be able to tolerate the level of poverty that actually exists. At the end, I'll put the arguments side by side. I've never lived in poverty, but I've often wondered why we tolerate it. If I didn't have a home or enough food to eat, I would hope that I could get some help. I've had a career in economics and I've always been on the left, so I've always thought we should be eradicating poverty one way or another. But somehow many of us live as if it's a necessary evil. If I'm being really honest, I think at times I have been a bit complacent. Starting this YouTube channel has really made me realise the level of inequality and poverty that we actually have in the UK. And the fact that this is a global problem, I'm feeling that I can't ignore that either. Just because I was born on a bit of a planet that happens to be wealthy, I'm feeling less and less comfortable that people born on different parts of the planet haven't been born into the same privileges. I don't think that poverty is merely a matter of acceptable economic outcomes. For me, it raises fundamental moral questions about the values and principles of our society that govern how we use the Earth's resources. I'm a firm believer that there isn't an objective theory. The economics that you believe in is shaped by the moral perspective that you start from. So let's look at these different moral positions that might be adopted in relation to poverty. The moral position then determines what the economic policy should be. I particularly want to try and understand why some people think that poverty is acceptable. So I'm starting from a position on this. I know my conclusion. I believe that we should not accept poverty as an unavoidable part of human existence, and that we have a moral duty to eradicate it. But I am going to look at both sides to try and take an honest look at the arguments why poverty might be considered a normal, acceptable outcome. So there are so many things that I feel like quoting here, and I'm definitely not going to do an exhaustive survey of the ethics of tolerating poverty. But I've picked the ones that stood out when I was thinking about it, and I've made a selection of references that give us a picture of views on whether we should eradicate or tolerate poverty. Let's start by the type of references that influence my view, that give me the firm belief that we should accept no poverty, that I can't live comfortably if other people are not okay. I've been quoting Thomas Paine a little bit recently. In his book, Agrarian Justice, Paine says that poverty is a thing created by that which is called civilized life. Poverty doesn't exist in human beings' natural state. This makes so much sense. When human beings first appeared, there was no inequality, no poverty. This has only appeared as we've evolved into living in societies. The idea of a national economy itself is a human creation, the creation of societal structures that create inequality. According to Paine, the earth is the common property of the human race, and no one should be deprived of access to its resources. I love this. When you think of the earth floating in infinite space, it's kind of absurd that someone can actually expect to own anything. It just doesn't make sense. Some great wisdom comes from Gratian, the 12th century Benedictine monk. Gratian views wealth not as an end in itself, but as a form of stewardship, implying that those with excess have a duty to use their resources for the common good. The mirror of this duty is that everyone has the right to basic necessities. This concept is further developed by Thomas Aquinas, who argued that private property is justifiable only if it's used for the benefit of others. He asserted that whatever a man has in superabundance is owed of natural right to the poor for their sustenance. The bread which you withhold belongs to the hungry, the clothing you shut away to the naked, and the money you bury in the earth is the redemption and freedom of the penniless. Many of us hoard and stock things that we might not even use or consume. This is a really challenging idea, that I'm holding someone else's share, powerful. I'm as guilty as anybody of having more stuff than I need. This really makes me think. The stuff that I have that I don't use. That's really interesting to stop and think about the status of that. Aquinas' view implies that charity isn't a matter of generosity, but of justice. The right to basic sustenance overrides the right to private property. I think Karl Marx has interesting things to say here too. So many people reject Marx because they think communism failed. I don't agree with everything Marx says, but a lot of his analysis is amazing. Marx argued that poverty is a result of the capitalist system, which entrenches private property and class divisions. He called for the abolition of private property and the establishment of a classless society where wealth is distributed according to need. This is just as valid today as it was when he wrote it. Mahatma Gandhi advocated for a similar principle of sarvodaya, welfare for all, which emphasises equitable distribution and condemns industrial society's contribution to economic inequality. Looking at more contemporary sources, someone recently mentioned in the comments of another video that I did, Peter Singer's article, Famine, Affluence and Morality. I'd never read this and I appreciated doing so. It was actually part of the motivation for making this video. Singer starts with two assumptions. First, that suffering and death from lack of food, shelter and medical care are bad. And second, if it is in our power to prevent something bad from happening without thereby sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we ought morally to do it. I find these two assumptions very convincing. I think it's very hard to argue against these. But once you accept those assumptions, that comes with implications, big implications. Kayla Chadwick, a TV producer and video editor, went viral with her post, "I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about other people in 2017. Chadwick says if making sure your fellow citizens can afford to eat, get an education and go to the doctor isn't enough of a reason to fund those things, I've nothing left to say to you." She goes on, "I'm done trying to convince these hordes of selfish, cruel people to look beyond themselves." I personally buy into all of these arguments. Chadwick's frustration captures the essence of the argument against poverty, a lack of empathy for those in need, revealing a profound failure in our collective humanity. I find this really compelling. The case is really strong. However, I think it's sad if we all stop trying to make the case for compassion and empathy. I kind of agree that there's no point in trying to convince people that they're just plain wrong, if it just triggers resistance and defensiveness. But perhaps we need to think again about different ways of making the case, not preaching, but inviting, attracting. If we want to change people's attitudes, we have to understand why people are thinking differently. I don't believe that most people are cruel. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting, I think. Let's take a look at how you might justify the existence of poverty. These perspectives often view poverty as a natural outcome of human society, of economic dynamics, the consequence of individual failings. Aristotle, for example, believed that some individuals are naturally suited to be rulers, while others are destined to be ruled. Similarly, Thomas Malthus argued that poverty is the natural consequence of overpopulation, suggesting that resource scarcity and misery is an inevitable part of human existence. It's the way that overpopulation is solved. In terms of economic theory, some see poverty as playing a role in free market capitalism, that it's a necessary part of the market's self-regulating mechanisms. Social Darwinism extends this argument by asserting that poverty serves as a natural process for weeding out those who are less capable, thereby promoting the progress of society. Thinkers like Ayn Rand champion individual freedom and self-interest as the highest moral goods, proposing that poverty is often a result of personal failings or lack of initiative. In this view, wealth and success are signs of individual merit, while poverty reflects personal shortcomings. Prominent economists like Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman argue that free markets, when left free of government intervention, naturally lead to improved standards of living over time. They suggest that inequality and by extension poverty is an inherent outcome of market dynamics, with wealth gradually trickling down to the benefit of society as a whole. Neoliberalism as an ideology embraces this notion, implying that attempts to eliminate poverty might disrupt economic freedom and efficiency. From a moral perspective, some versions of kind of Calvinism and the Protestant work ethic see hard work and economic success as a sign of divine favour, while poverty is interpreted as a reflection of moral failure, laziness or sin. So, what do you believe if you accept the level of poverty that we currently have? Pulling together all of these different ideas, I tried to make a list of the beliefs that are implied if you don't think that poverty should be eradicated. Inequality is natural. There's a natural hierarchy. Wealth is a sign of individual merit. Helping the poor disrupts a natural process. Competition brings the best out of people, and poverty reflects individual failure or laziness. I so disagree with these points. Everyone was equal before civilization. Earth is a common property. Wealth just breeds more wealth, and it's not based on merit. The fear of poverty may be a powerful incentive to make people work. However, it's cruel and inhuman to deny people the basic essentials. We have a moral duty to help. Competition breeds selfishness and unhappiness. Unselfishness and awareness of everyone's well-being brings happiness. Inequality is so systematic, it's just not a fair competition. So, for me, I think the definite conclusion of this is that poverty should not exist. And if this is true, we need to change economic policy to eradicate inequality and poverty. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd be really grateful for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.